What if I told you that Sparta, the most feared warrior society in ancient Greece, trained from childhood for war, once faced a moment so humiliating that its soldiers did the unthinkable? They surrendered, not in a grand battle, not after their homeland fell, but trapped on a small, forgotten island, cut off from everything, slowly breaking while their enemies watched from the sea. And the most shocking part? Athens didn't beat Sparta with superior warriors. They beat them with timing, terrain, and a decision that turned the entire war upside down. This is the beginning of the Battle of Sphacteria. By 425 BC, the Peloponnesian War had already been raging for years. Athens dominated the sea with its massive navy and wealth from empire. Sparta dominated the land with unmatched discipline and fearsome hoplites. Neither side could land a killing blow, so the war turned into something darker, slower, more desperate: raids, sieges, attrition. And then Athens gambled on something bold. A general named Demosthenes saw an opportunity on the western coast of Greece, at a place called Pylos. It was rough, rocky terrain, seemingly unimportant, but Demosthenes believed it could become a dagger pointed straight at Sparta's heart. Against expectations, he fortified it and waited. Sparta could not ignore Pylos. An Athenian fort inside Spartan territory was unacceptable. So they moved quickly. They sent troops to respond, landing on a nearby island called Sphacteria. The plan was simple: cut off the Athenians, block their supply lines, force them to surrender. At first, it looked like Sparta had done exactly what Sparta always did: take control through discipline and force. But then Athens reacted faster than expected. Their navy surrounded the island, and suddenly the situation flipped. The hunters had become the trapped. On Sphacteria were hundreds of Spartan soldiers and allies, elite warriors who had never been placed in a situation like this before. No reinforcements, no escape, no food coming in, just sea on all sides, and an enemy watching patiently. Sparta's greatest strength had always been control. Now they had none. At first, Sparta refused to believe the situation was serious. Spartan warriors were trained to endure anything: hunger, pain, exhaustion, fear. But war does not always break bodies. Sometimes it breaks time. Days stretched into weeks. Supplies ran low. Morale started to crack in ways Sparta rarely admitted. Across the water, Athenian ships circled like predators, preventing any relief force from landing. Back in mainland Greece, news spread slowly. But when it did, it carried weight. Because something unthinkable was happening. Spartan soldiers were being contained, not defeated in battle, but trapped. And in Sparta, even the idea of surrender was treated as a myth, something that happened to other cities, not them. Yet on Sphacteria, that myth was beginning to feel real. Athens realized what they had. If they could capture Spartan soldiers alive, it would shatter the image of Spartan invincibility across Greece. But there was a problem. The island terrain was brutal. Rocky slopes, dense brush, and limited landing zones. A direct assault would be costly, maybe even impossible. So Athens adjusted. Instead of relying on heavy infantry, they brought in lighter troops: archers, slingers, skirmishers, fast, mobile, relentless. And they began a new kind of warfare: not a charge, not a formation clash, but constant harassment, arrows from a distance, stones striking from hidden positions, quick attacks, followed by disappearance. The Spartans, trained for close, disciplined combat, struggled to respond. Their strength, formation fighting, was being stripped away piece by piece. And for the first time in Spartan memory, they were losing control of the battlefield. On a small island in the Aegean, something was happening that would echo across all of Greece. Sparta, the symbol of discipline, strength, and unbreakable will, was no longer the hunter. They were the trapped. And Athens was just beginning to tighten the net. Spartan warriors, men raised to never retreat, never surrender, never break, were starving, exhausted, and surrounded. And across the water, Athens was facing its own impossible choice: attack or risk letting history's most feared soldiers escape humiliation. What happened next didn't just decide a battle. It shattered Sparta's reputation forever. This is the second half of the Battle of Sphacteria. By now, Sphacteria had turned into a nightmare for both sides. The Spartans were trapped on the island, slowly running out of supplies. But Athens wasn't having an easy time either. The terrain was brutal: steep hills, thick brush, and nowhere for heavy infantry to form proper lines. Every attempt to push closer came with losses, and so the battle turned into something strange: a stalemate, with pressure building every day. Athens had control of the sea. Sparta still had dangerous, well-trained warriors on land. Neither side could finish the other cleanly. And then politics entered the battlefield. In Athens, debate turned into chaos. The war had already dragged on too long, and frustration was rising. Then a political figure named Cleon stepped forward. Bold, loud, confident. He claimed the generals were too cautious, that he could end the crisis quickly. Many mocked him, but Cleon made a dangerous promise: give him command, and he would bring the Spartans back alive or destroy them. To everyone's surprise, Athens agreed. And just like that, an inexperienced politician was handed control of one of the most critical military operations of the war. He quickly joined forces with the experienced commander Demosthenes, who already understood the battlefield. Together, they prepared for a final move. The strategy was simple, but ruthless. No direct assault, no traditional phalanx clash. Instead, pressure from every direction. Athenian light troops moved constantly through the rough terrain. Archers fired from hidden positions. Slingers struck from cliffs and cover. The Spartans were no longer facing an army they could engage. They were facing an environment that never stopped attacking them. And slowly, it worked. Fatigue set in. Wounds accumulated. Morale, once the strongest weapon in the Spartan system, began to crack under relentless pressure. Even Spartan discipline has limits when there is no food, no sleep, and no hope of reinforcement. After weeks of isolation, something unthinkable happened. Spartan resistance began to collapse, not in a single dramatic charge, but in exhaustion, in silence, in the slow realization that no rescue was coming. Then came the moment that would shock the ancient world. The Spartans sent word asking for terms, for negotiation, for an end. And Athens paused, because they knew exactly what they were about to receive: Spartan prisoners, alive, a rarity so shocking it could reshape the entire war. When negotiations concluded, the result was staggering. Out of the original force, around 120 Spartan hoplites were taken alive, not killed in battle, captured. Sparta's reputation, built over generations of fear, had just suffered a crack visible across all of Greece. When news reached the Greek world, it spread fast. Athens celebrated wildly. They had done what many thought impossible. They had forced Sparta into surrender. Meanwhile, in Sparta, there was silence. Because this wasn't just a military loss, it was an identity crisis. Sparta's entire system depended on one belief: that a Spartan never surrenders. Now that belief had been broken, and worse, it had been broken publicly. Other Greek city-states saw it too. The myth of Spartan invincibility was gone. The Battle of Sphacteria didn't end the Peloponnesian War, but it changed everything about how it was fought. Athens proved that strategy, mobility, and pressure could break even the strongest warriors in Greece. And Sparta learned a painful truth. Even the most feared army in history can be trapped, isolated, and forced to break. On a small island in 425 BC, a myth died, and the war became something far more dangerous. Because after Sphacteria, neither side believed the other was unbeatable anymore.